Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. We are still here, Niall?
We are. I'm delighted to be here.
Delighted to be here.
A delightful Wednesday morning.
The sentiment for the day is delight.
Sunshine outside, not too hot. I much prefer this time of year in the nation's capital to the height of summer where I just perspire to an unpleasant degree, frankly.
I prefer the height of summer.
Really?
It gets cold, so you got to turn the heat on in the apartment, which causes a drying effect.
That is true.
Got to break out the humidifier, for our skin, Niall, for we to look bright and sunny and happy and...
You break out the humidifier if you like. As long as we escape the humidity of like July and August in DC, I am happy enough. So I'm happy to be in fall. Coming up on Rising, the Arizona Attorney General is suing Mike Johnson for not swearing in a newly elected Congresswoman, Adelita Grijalva.
Plus, Elon Musk is blasting Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy after Duffy said that SpaceX was behind schedule in going back to the moon.
And police have arrested a pardoned Capitol rioter after he allegedly threatened to kill House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
And now to get to my radar.
That is true, Robby. Yes, I missed your cue for it, but please do tell us what is on your radar.
Let's get there. All right. Of all the things to get really, really mad at President Donald Trump about, Democrats are going with White House renovations. Yes, the president's decision to add a ballroom to the White House is actually being met with significant fury by liberals and Democrats now that the construction is actually underway. An image of the White House being remodeled, which did necessitate a partial demolition of the East Wing's facade, went viral on X yesterday, prompting a great many meltdowns. Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote on X, "This is Trump's presidency in a single photo. Illegal, destructive, and not helping you." Well-known liberal social media personality Ron Filkowski wrote, "This is a desecration and an abomination." First, he posted an AI video of himself wearing a crown, dumping excrement on the heads of Americans. Then he starts tearing down part of the White House for his Mar-a-Lago-style ballroom. Hillary Clinton got in on the game, writing, "It's not his house, it's your house, and he's destroying it." Hillary's outrage is particularly ironic because, as the journalist Selena Zito pointed out, every president makes changes to the decor and even the structure of the White House, and the Clintons were no different. Yes, it's true that the addition of the ballroom is more significant than anything Bill Clinton did, and it's also true that it has required a bit of demolition, but the part of the White House being demolished is the East Wing's facade, which wasn't even part of the original structure and is being cleared away so that the White House can have a ballroom, which is a perfectly legitimate and some have argued necessary improvement. The president obviously would like to host larger events and currently has no means to do so. If a future president doesn't like the style of the ballroom, well, they can change it. It happens. In fact, let's have a little history lesson. Teddy Roosevelt expanded and renovated the White House in 1902. FDR added a second story and a basement during his presidency in the 1930s. Then from 49 to 52, Harry Truman comprehensively remodeled the White House, dismantling and rebuilding the interior entirely. It's a whole new building. Then the building, because of that renovation, had actually lost much of its architectural flavor at that point. And so when John F. Kennedy came to the presidency, First Lady Jackie Kennedy engaged in an extensive restoration process that made it fit the style of the earlier presidents. Subsequent presidents have refurbished the first family's living quarters. Richard Nixon even added a bowling lane, of all things, in that spirit. Trump is adding to the grandeur of the White House. He's not destroying it, he's making room for larger state dinners, which currently have to sharply limit guests or serve people under tents outdoors. Best of all, private donations are paying for the renovation, not the taxpayers. That seems like a good deal to me. And say what you will about Trump, but one thing the voters seem to like about him is that he values a good deal when it comes to real estate. I'm interested to see what your take is, Niall. I was kind of thrown by this one. The volume of the liberal hysterics and shrieking took me by surprise. It's not bulldozing the White House. They're adding on to it. There's a little bit of knocking something down. It's not very much of the building. What am I missing?
Well, let me first pick up on your historical thread, because I feel obligated to point out that the original architect of the White House was born in Ireland. A man by the name of James Hoban, who was born in Kilkenny, Ireland. So let's give him his props.
Fantastic.
Secondly, I largely agree with you that some of the outrage about this is rather overdone. Because, look, I mean, I'm critical of Trump for lots of reasons. I'll be critical about something else he's done later in this show. But I do think that people like myself who have criticisms need to sort of prioritise what those criticisms are. And a renovation of the White House seems to run pretty low among them. I do take... Like some of the guy who, the kind of digital guy who said it was an abomination, Philip Kowski, like I don't have much time for that. I did think Elizabeth Warren to me was sort of getting at this thing of using the photos of the destruction almost as a kind of metaphor for what the Trump presidency is doing.
Okay.
And that I can accept more easily. It does go to the power of the image. I mean, not to get us down too much of a tangent, but I think back to, do you remember the photo of George W. Bush as president flying over New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina? And he was looking out the window. Now, I think his response to Katrina was way lacking, but there was this criticism of the photo that he was looking sort of impassive or whatever. It's like, what's he supposed to do? He's supposed to be like crying and, you know, rending his garments or something. Like, the photo was the photo, but it came to encapsulate a broader lack of care or response to Hurricane Katrina.
Those kinds of projections that people do are always so
suspect.
Silly.
No, I think that it is, that stuff is tricky.
And I would not defend every single renovation. Like the Truman one was not good because now they had to do it because the building had no longer become functional. It had basically been tweaked so many different times that the entire structure was unsound. So they had to rebuild it from the inside. But when they did that, it was no longer sort of in keeping with the Greco-Roman or French influences of the founder's vision. And so then Jackie Kennedy did this very famous and very successful remodeling, refurbishing to have it more in the style of what Jefferson and Madison would have intended, that's a good thing.
Right.
I'm for that. Obviously, I'm for the fact that Truman had to remodel it because it was going to collapse.
Sure.
If Trump, installed like
a glowing neon Trump sign above the top.
Cannon kind of Back to the Future Part 2 changes to it, I would be against them, but this is really mostly just adding on to the structure.
Right, and I have to say, having been in the East Room of the White House quite a few times, it is relatively small for the biggest room in the White House. You know, for those kind of events, it's pretty cramped. So I don't really object to the purpose so long as it's executed with some measure of taste.
It doesn't look like it does on our screen.
No, it doesn't.
These buildings are all next to each other.
Exactly.
The White House does not lead into, what was that, the Lincoln? The White House and the Lincoln and the...
Capitol and the Supreme Court and all that.
Got the actual thing on camera. That's how it looks.
Much nicer. I'm not sure about that flagpole, but it's fine.
Oh, yeah, you can see the crane, I'm just amazed that they're proceeding so swiftly with this. Construction seems to take forever in any other context.
I guess
you can waive whatever zoning.
I guess it's
in your way.
High priority job, I would imagine.
They have a neighbor saying, filing complaints.
Not in my backyard.
With the district saying, this will cast a shadow on my lawn. My rights are being violated. I must thwart this at all times.
Rob in the Treasury Department of Daylight.
Yeah, I've told you that was a really formative experience for me in Ann Arbor as a college student at the University of Michigan, seeing these, the most liberal, one of the most liberal towns in America, these super liberal but affluent, mostly white people who live in the city of Ann Arbor, fighting with the most not conservative ideologically, but just conservative by disposition, fighting every single new building and a single attempt to add height, to add more housing for the students.
There'll be none of that.
Right.
Preserve the original style.
Yes.
That's how it goes.
All right, coming up, the Attorney General of Arizona is suing House Speaker Mike Johnson. We'll be right back with the details on that.
Chris Mays, the Attorney General for the state of Arizona, has filed a lawsuit to get Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva sworn into office. Grijalva was elected to Arizona's 7th district nearly 1 month ago, filling the same seat that had been held by her father, who died in March.
But with the government in an ongoing shutdown, House Speaker Mike Johnson's refused to officially seat Grijalva. The newly filed lawsuit asks a federal judge in Washington, D.C. to declare Grijalva a member of the House and allow someone else to administer her oath of office if Johnson won't do it. The lawsuit reads, "This case is about whether someone duly elected to the House who indisputably meets the constitutional qualifications of the office may be denied her rightful office simply because the speakers decided to keep the House out of, quote, regular session." It continues, Speaker Johnson wishes to delay seating Ms. Grijalva to prevent her from signing a discharge petition that would force a vote on the release of the Epstein files and or to strengthen his hand in the ongoing budget and appropriations negotiations.
Grijalva has promised to sign a petition that would indeed force a vote in the House to facilitate the release of the Jeffrey Epstein case files. There need to be 218 signatures to force that vote, and Grijalva would be number 218.
Johnson has repeatedly said that his decision not to swear in Grijalva has nothing to do with the Epstein files. Rather, he says it's just House tradition to only swear in new members during regular sessions. When asked about the lawsuit on Tuesday, he told reporters this, "I think it's patently absurd. We run the House. She has no jurisdiction. We're following the precedent. She's looking for national publicity, and apparently she's gotten some of it, but good luck with that."
With the government shutdown now at day 22, Johnson has said he'll call the House back to session and administer Grijalva's oath once Democrats help to reopen the government. But other lawmakers have joined the calls demanding that Grijalva be sworn in immediately. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly writes, "Representative-elect Grijalva is still waiting to be sworn in. My office has been hearing from more folks in her district, and we're doing everything we can to help. But it's past time they got the representation they deserve. Swear her in." And Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin writes, "Enough is enough. Adelita Grijalva was elected on September 23rd. The people of Arizona have a right to be represented in Congress."
Well, Niall, on this one, I don't have particularly strongly held views. Obviously, she has been elected, and so she should be able to join the House. I don't know whether it is tradition that you wait till a regular session, but if they're not having regular sessions, should that stand in the way of her being seated? I guess I would probably say no. I don't want her just being used as a bargaining chip, if that's really what it is. And I support the vote she plans to take to release more information about Jeffrey Epstein, even though I don't think it will satisfy anyone, as I've said many times. I still favor doing it. At the same time, I don't know whether she has any standing to sue over the House gets to come up with their own procedures, basically. So I don't know that this is. Yeah. But I just don't know, and I don't have strong feelings. And obviously, Arizona's entitled to representation, so she should certainly, within the fullness of time, sooner rather than later, be able to participate in the House. That seems basic to me.
Yeah, I think that final point is the most important one on principle. The people who elected her are entitled to have a representative in Congress. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody has to necessarily be sworn in, 1 hour or 6 hours after they win an election. But coming up to 1 month, that seems an excessive period of time to leave those voters without the representative whom they elected. So that's the basic principle. I do think on the politics, it does come back to the Epstein matter. I think there is widespread suspicion that Johnson's reluctance isn't to do with the arcane issues of whether it's a regular session or isn't a regular session, but in trying to deprive the people trying to get that petition together of the final decisive vote that would bring them over the line. As a political matter, I don't even think that that's very wise on Mike Johnson's part, because it seems to me that the controversy that is created by not swearing her in actually fuels people's suspicion about the whole thing. Whereas if she's going to vote for it and thereby bring the thing across the finish line, well, she's going to do that sooner or later, so you might as well get it out of the way.
They can't prevent this forever, which is why I find that as an explanation maybe not adequate, because for that.
It's going to happen.
For that reason. Maybe it's more, I think it's probably more about strengthening the shutdown hand, saying, if Democrats give ground, we'll get her sworn in.
Yeah.
Seems more likely to me because this is going to happen. Unless Trump just said to Mike Johnson, hey, I don't want this vote being taken for as long as possible. So that's your directive.
Which is also
for as long as possible.
Which is also possible.
Right, because the Speaker is pretty good at giving Trump what he wants.
Absolutely.
He has managed to hold on to that job and is not at risk of losing it because he has such a strong relationship with Trump, basically just with Republican leadership in general.
Right, but particularly with Trump, I think.
Yeah, he's wrangled all the wild animals.
No, he has. He has been able to keep his party in line and be able to silence dissent, partly because he is, I think, seen as doing Trump's bidding. Whether that is good in the broader scheme of things is a whole...
is an agreeable manner for Republicans.
Maybe for Republicans. I mean, I don't think anyone who filled that role would meet with Democratic or Liberal approval. No. And, it is interesting the way people's sort of personal demeanour, I think, like the kind of people I think Liberals and Conservatives like are often very different. And Mike Johnson, who, is just, I think, temperamentally conservative as well as ideologically conservative. Anyway, that's neither here nor there when it comes to Grijalva, who is entitled to hold or take the seat to which she was elected, and the voters who elected her are entitled to have her there.
It goes to show the kind of different news stories that flourish in right versus liberal media. I confess I knew very little about this even from the news sources that I consume. Obviously, the Hill is a more talks to both sides.
Right.
But in just the kind of conservative, or if I'm watching Fox, it's just not, this has not been something that was discussed. I'm like, what's going on? Why has this person not been seated?
Right.
Whereas I'm sure in more liberal coverage,
yes. I was well aware of it, Robby. Don't worry. No, it's true. I mean, it is true that I think people's media ecosystems have become very much separated out. And sometimes, there are people, I would say, particularly on the online right, who I'm sort of vaguely aware exist but are big figures in that world. Similarly, I can't remember who it was that we either quoted or had on here who was of a more liberal disposition, and I saw some of our audience being like, who is it? I've never heard of that person, and it's someone who I think virtually any politically alert liberal has heard of frequently. So there is a sort of media separation of a kind going on there.
We're worlds apart.
We are.
Bridging the gap here on Rising.
That's what we do. Trump's planned meeting with Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, has been called off. We'll talk about what that means for ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine. Don't go anywhere.
Well, the anticipated meeting in Budapest between President Trump and Russian President Putin has been called off for now.
A White House official told The Hill that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had a, quote, productive call yesterday. The official continued, quote, therefore, an additional in-person meeting between the Secretary and Foreign Minister is not necessary, and there are no plans for President Trump to meet with President Putin in the immediate future.
Trump elaborated on the situation yesterday during an Oval Office press conference. Let's listen to that.
The meeting with Vladimir Putin is canceled or put on hold. Do you know what happened there, and does that affect your decision whether or not to send Tomahawks?
No, I don't want to have a wasted meeting. I don't want to have a waste of time, so I'll see what happens. But we did all of these great deals, great peace deals. They're all peace deals. They're agreements, solid agreements, every one of them. But this one, and I said, go to the line of battle, the battlefield lines, and you pull back and you go home, and everybody take some time off, because you got two countries that are killing each other. You got two countries that are losing 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers a week. So we'll see what happens. We haven't made a determination.
Trump appeared there to be referencing his proposal for Russia and Ukraine to stop where they are and lay down arms. Lavrov, however, made it clear yesterday that Russia opposes an immediate ceasefire. Zelensky, for his part, says that Putin returned to diplomacy when Trump threatened to send Ukraine Tomahawk missiles. But Zelensky says Putin changed his tone as soon as that possibility was eased.
And I am reluctant to agree with Zelensky, who I think has often had a naive view about his country's position in this war, but it does appear to be the case that Russia got a little spooked when the missiles were on the table, and when Trump said, yeah, it's a little bit, and I would be very careful about giving Ukraine these missiles. I think that could be an escalation, and it should very much be a last resort. But then when Trump put a pause on that, then Russia seemed less willing to negotiate. So maybe we should make this real direct for Russia. Battle lines where they are now, you keep what you have, and the war is over. Take it now, and they say or they say no, then Ukraine gets the Tomahawk missiles. I don't know what else to do at this point. That seems perfectly valid. That is a cessation of Ukrainian territory to Russia, and a recognition that Russia has conquered part of Ukraine that Ukraine is not happy with, but in the service of ending the war, I think that's the best thing to do. If Russia's not okay with even that, then all right, let's arm them to the teeth. I don't know why not.
Right. No, I agree, and I think, as you know, I've argued for some time, I favor a more aggressive American position in terms of backing up Ukraine. But the important thing here, I think, is this context about the battle lines that you mentioned, because it's completely understandable that Zelensky and the Ukrainians don't want this situation where peace talks are purportedly taking place, but Russia all the time is encroaching further and further into Ukrainian territory, because that just gives Putin a license to constantly change whatever is purportedly being agreed to at these talks, including some painful concessions for the Ukrainians. And Putin will just say, oh, well, actually, we're 10 miles further west than we were a week ago, so we'll take that part now as well. And it becomes a pointless endeavor for the Ukrainians, really. I do think, and I know it's fairly rare for me to praise Trump, but I'm glad that he called off the meeting with Putin. I think that was the right thing to do in those circumstances if Russia is just going to engage in kind of shady behavior.
Yeah, and to be clear, he hasn't closed off the possibility of the Tomahawk missiles. He's just said, well, we're still thinking about it.
Right.
Which, again, let's be very careful, because I don't want to be at war directly with Russia. But at this point, they're just not. They're not evincing any interest in the peace we are trying so desperately to foster. And if you don't want peace, then you get war.
Yeah, well, and also you just have to draw a line somewhere, otherwise you're going to get played, essentially. And that's always been the fear, I think, that Putin has kind of just adapted to Trump's tactics to get what he wants without making really any meaningful concessions at all. So that's the problem.
We shall see.
We shall indeed. Meanwhile, is Trump seeking cash from the Department of Justice? Stick around for my notes on that topic when you rejoin Rising after this quick break.
All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
I'm glad you asked, Robby, because another day, another revelation about Donald Trump. The New York Times revealed yesterday that Trump is demanding that the Justice Department pay him $230 million or thereabouts. The enormous cash haul would settle his complaints about the various prior investigations into his conduct. Now, let me be clear from the start. I don't think the government should be paying anything. The investigations themselves were valid. But the bigger issue right here and right now is that Trump is seeking a payout from a government that he himself controls. The massive check he's looking for would be issued by a Justice Department atop which he has installed his loyalists. Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy Todd Blanche both previously represented Trump as personal lawyers. And the Times also notes in its story that the head of the DOJ's Civil Division, Stanley Woodward Jr., represented Trump's co-defendant, Walt Nauta, in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Woodward and Blanche are particularly important here because, according to the Times, they would be the ones to approve a settlement. One more detail from the Times story. Its reporters note that the DOJ doesn't even necessarily tell the public as soon as it settles the kind of claims Trump has made. Quote, if or when the Trump administration pays the president what could be hundreds of millions of dollars, there may be no immediate official declaration that it did so. This is an amazing situation in all of the wrong ways. Naturally enough, Trump was asked about it. Here he is responding to Caitlin Collins of CNN yesterday.
New York Times is reporting that your legal team is seeking $230 million from your own Justice Department now in response to the investigations into you. Is that something you want your legal team to do?
I don't know what the numbers are. I don't even talk to them about it. All I know is that they would owe me a lot of money, but I'm not looking for money. I'd give it to charity or something. I would give it to charity, any money. But look, what they did, they rigged the election. And as you know, we had, in one case, 60 Minutes had to pay us a lot of money. George Slobodanopoulos had to pay us a lot of money, and they already paid. You know, they paid me a lot of money.
Firstly, nobody rigged the election. Second, I'll come to the media cases he mentioned there in a second. But go ahead, Mr. President, with your analysis of the ethical issues.
That decision would have to go across my desk, and it's awfully strange to make a decision where I'm paying myself. In other words, did you ever have one of those cases where you have to decide how much you're paying yourself in damages? But I was damaged very greatly, and any money that I would get, I would give to charity.
I hope you heard what he said there to one of the people standing by. Did you ever have one of those cases where you have to decide how much you're paying yourself in damages? No, I can't say I did. Most of us didn't either, because we don't hold presidential power and therefore can't leverage that power in a blatant shakedown like this. Perhaps we shouldn't be that surprised by all of this. Trump's critics are often focused mostly on the threat he poses to American democracy. But one part of that has always been all about the Benjamins. Trump's case against CBS, which he alluded to in that clip we just played, was over a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. His claims would have been laughed out of almost any court in the land. But CBS's parent company, Paramount, needing the approval of Trump's FCC for a merger, settled the case for $16 million. They got their merger, Trump got his cash, and Bernie Sanders correctly called it government extortion. How about Trump's assault on law firms? Well, that's yielded rich pickings too. Back in April, Trump announced 5 firms would provide $600 million in pro bono work to causes that Trump supports. Colleges have caved too, albeit to the government rather than to Trump personally. An August story, also from the Times, found that Trump had personally interceded in settlement talks with Columbia University in May to insist the college pay up to the tune of $200 million. It agreed to do so as well. We don't even have time here to delve into the numerous ways Trump and his family have benefited from his grip on power. A New Yorker magazine investigation over the summer put the gains of his family circle across both his terms as president at a stunning $3.4 billion. One more thing. Trump's claim that if the DOJ settled his claims, he would give the money to charity. Way back in 2016, a reporter who's done some of the best work on Trump's finances, David Farenthold, looked into Trump's claims of charitable giving. A months-long investigation, he wrote in the Washington Post, quote, has not been able to verify many of Trump's boasts about his philanthropy. Farenthold brought the receipts, or rather the lack of receipts. Quote, Trump promised to give away the proceeds of Trump University. He promised to donate the salary he earned from The Apprentice. He promised to give personal donations to the charities chosen by contestants on Celebrity Apprentice. He promised to donate $250,000 to a charity helping Israeli soldiers and veterans. But the Post has been unable to verify that he followed through on any of them. End quote. Colour me shocked. Donald Trump is, as I've said here before, an aberrational president. Unusually mendacious, unusually vindictive, and certainly unusually authoritarian. But he's also a grubby and greedy little man. And now he has his fingers in the pie at the Department of Justice, trying to claw out as much cash as he can get. What a time, Robby. What a time.
I expect the ACLU to represent him in his quest to sue the government and get justice. I mean, I love when the government gets sued. Of course, there is an obvious conflict of interest here in that
Yes.
Trump is himself a government figure, and the people he picked to run the Justice Department are loyal to him and have worked for him in the past, which is perfectly appropriate in terms of them being in the government itself, but represents a conflict of interest in this case. Most of the examples you cited, I would I would complicate in various ways. He, like anyone else, can bring a defamation lawsuit against George Stephanopoulos, etc. And I support suing the government. It is interesting because the doctrine of qualified
Yes, but
immunity,
not when you are the head of government.
the government. Yes, then it's just kind of looting. So this is not good.
Right.
But because of qualified immunity, this is more than a little interesting to me. There's a general, so this is this principle that basically it's very hard to sue government agents if they do something wrong to you. And everyone from police officers to public teachers to government bureaucrats.
In the course of their official duties.
Right, in the course of their official duties. But in effect, what it does is vastly tip the scales against you suing the government for any sort of wrongdoing. If they stop you, routine stop, and you're, for whatever reason, have some cash in the back seat, they'll take that. That's gone. You're never getting that back. Sorry, that's over with. Even if it was totally inappropriate for them to take it, those kinds of things. So again, I'm generally sympathetic, but we'll see. That doctrine might harm Trump here, but of course he can just direct them because they're his people to make the payment, which is not a good thing.
I think that individual citizens who have been harmed
Let's make
by
it
the
easier
government,
for citizens to sue
then that is fine. What I think is just gross and obviously corrupt is Trump doing it. And remember, this is taxpayers' money at the end of the day. It is him having installed people who are extremely loyal to him, making the decision as to whether they will just ladle over millions and millions of dollars, $230 million or so, to the president. I mean, it's an absurd situation.
I know, but the really only very reliable check on something like this happening is at the ballot box. That is the ultimate check on this kind of behavior. And I think liberals, Democrats, people who oppose Trump have very much tried to go with a variety of procedural checks or prosecutions or investigations, whereas the ultimate, the check available is the one they can't seem to use successfully, which is just that you have to run someone who does not manifest these qualities and defeat them in the election.
Well, except that one of the checks that was available was indeed the courts, and Trump successfully delayed 3 of the 4 cases against him so that voters who were at the ballot box did not know what the verdict in those cases would have been. That's a bit of a problem.
Well, the other substantive check is Congress's own ability to impeach and remove the president, which was attempted but failed because there's not enough members of the party having won election. So it still comes back to a democracy issue.
Well, and also the Republican Party did not stand up, in my view, to democracy, but that's a whole other debate.
Next up, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas appears to be on rocky ground. Up next, why President Trump is now giving a warning to Hamas. Stay tuned. President Trump issued a warning to Hamas on Monday, posting to Truth Social, quote, "Numerous of our now great allies in the Middle East and areas surrounding the Middle East have explicitly and strongly, with great enthusiasm, informed me that they would welcome the opportunity at my request to go into Gaza with a heavy force and straighten out Hamas if Hamas continues to act badly." The president continued, "The love and spirit for the Middle East has not been seen like this in 1,000 years. It is a beautiful thing to behold. I told these countries in Israel, not yet. There is still hope that Hamas will do what is right. If they do not, an end to Hamas will be fast, furious, and brutal." That post comes after both sides have traded fire in the nearly 2 weeks since the deal was signed.
Vice President J.D. Vance and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are both in Israel this week as Hamas continues to deliver the bodies of deceased hostages. Vance urged patience during the fragile ceasefire, but later echoed Trump's warning. Take a listen.
This is difficult. This is not going to happen overnight. Some of these hostages are buried under thousands of pounds of rubble. Some of the hostages, nobody even knows where they are. That doesn't mean we shouldn't work to get them, and that doesn't mean we don't have confidence that we will. It's just a reason to counsel in favor of a little bit of patience. This is going to take a little bit of time. The terms of the 20-point plan that the president put out there is very clear. It's supported not just by Israel, but by all of our Gulf Arab friends. I feel confident that we're going to be in a place where this peace lasts, where it's durable, and if Hamas doesn't cooperate, then as the President of the United States has said, Hamas is going to be obliterated.
Meantime, some on the left seem to be concerned Trump and Vance's warnings aren't safeguarding the ceasefire. and instead agitating Hamas. Ed Krasenstein quipped on X, well, that ceasefire didn't last long. Can Trump give back the Nobel Peace Prize now?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I would continue to advise the administration we want to be less involved here, and our involvement shouldn't be contingent on whether Hamas behaves itself. Obviously, Hamas will not behave itself. I think that is to be expected. And that, yes, their conduct is obviously reprehensible. They are reasserting control over the Gaza Strip. They are engaged, if the reports I've read are accurate, and I believe they are, in ritual executions of people who worked against them or opposed their rule, which is awful, obviously, but the effort to obliterate Hamas was exactly what Israel has been doing for the past 2 years. So how much more can they be obliterated without further obliterating everyone who lives there? So as awful as Hamas's governance of Gaza is, just blowing up more buildings, killing more people, for what? Why? I wish, and I share Trump's frustration, that this part of the world can't just get its act together and live in harmony and have democratic governance that is friendly to the West and friendly with Israel, and have Israel be friendly to them, and everyone can get along and benefit from the prosperity of the modern age, where you don't settle your differences with rockets and gunfire and kidnappings and blowing up of buildings, but live next to each other in harmony and trade, and the rest of the world is figuring that out, and they don't want that. So I guess it's just none of my business. That's sad for them.
There are obviously just very fundamental issues at the core of that conflict.
Fundamentalist issues.
Fundamental. Yeah, one of my favourite Onion headlines of all time was war-torn Middle East turns to religion for solace, which I enjoyed. But to the overall point here, I think the fundamentalist issue is we're now getting to the point between the first phase of this deal and the second and much more difficult attempt to make some sort of durable peace. The first phase was essentially a prisoner exchange deal, more or less. Israel released lots of people, including many Palestinians who had been held without charge. Hamas released the living hostages and is in the process of releasing the bodies of the deceased. And the consequence of that, or the equation in the deal, was a ceasefire for that. The bigger questions around things like Gaza's governance, a policing of it, etc., are really, really complicated. And I think this idea of an international stabilization force is interesting, but also raises enormous numbers of questions as to how that functions in practice. Because if you have, so you have in Gaza Hamas, and you also have armed groups that were openly armed and assisted by Israel as a kind of counterweight to Hamas. So in the struggle between those two forces, what does the international stabilization force do, right? It presumably can't weigh in to protect Hamas, because then Israel and the US go bananas and they're infuriated about that. And then if the international stabilization force intervenes essentially to protect the Israeli-backed gangs or militias, then they've no legitimacy at all with the local population. And one of the lessons of any kind, I would argue, of any kind of conflict resolution is that whoever's doing the policing needs to have some modicum of legitimacy with the populace that they're
doesn't
policing.
That, and again, then whenever we get into this level of specificity, I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on the Israel-Palestine conflict or the history of the Palestinian people, but doesn't it necessitate support for the Palestinian Authority as the counter Hamas governance system that is not as extreme and that Israel still doesn't like but can live with? Must not an effort be made effectively to displace Hamas with them?
Well, Possibly, but the problem...
What I would argue for.
Well, you could certainly argue for that, but the problem is that in the peace plan, the 20 or 21 point plan that Trump put out, Israel does not accept the Palestinian Authority as part of the governance of Gaza. And in fact, the predicate or the conditions are that the PA has to reform itself in unspecified ways before it is considered a valid party to do that. So again, it's the Trump plan leading to all kinds of questions. What reforms? Who judges whether the reforms have been sufficient? When will they be sufficient?
Right. So, Israel is never going to say that the reforms are sufficient,
right,
and that the governance is non-radical enough. The Israeli
to accept.
Never going to admit that.
Right.
So then it has to be, well, what do we think? And
right,
they need to just go along with it. And so that's what I would say. It is reasonable to say Hamas should not take part in the governance of Gaza after what they've done, or that Israel is just not willing to end the war until then there's going to be further and further destruction as any attacking, a government attacks another and the other has overwhelming ability to destroy their country until they submit. I mean, that is, I'm not so on Israel's side of this, but the reality is that they can destroy Gaza over and over again until there's no, to their utter satisfaction. The constraint on that is morality, is that the number of innocent people dying in the midst of that is too much for us to stomach. It's too much for me to stomach. I don't think they should do it. It just comes to a frustrating, well, then what are we supposed to do about it? And I don't know, and I just don't want to be involved.
Right. Well, and then what is going to happen, I think, if this plan goes forward, is this sort of quasi-colonial board of peace that is appointed.
Doesn't sound great either.
No, exactly.
Because, right, us trying to run their country or some UN commission trying to run their country seems like a recipe for them resenting it and then just handing power to some other radical group that opposes the occupiers, the
occupying power. Exactly. Well, in other news, Elon Musk is trading insults with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. We'll be right back to talk about that after this.
Tech mogul Elon Musk is bashing Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy after he said that SpaceX was falling behind schedule to get the U.S. back on the moon.
It all started with a CNBC interview the Transportation Secretary gave, where he said he would reopen the space contract to other companies like Blue Origin. Take a listen to that.
Now, SpaceX had the contract for Artemis 3. By the way, I love SpaceX. It's an amazing company. The problem is they're behind. They pushed their timelines out, and we're in a race against China. The president and I want to get to the moon in this president's term, so I'm going to open up the contract. Okay. We're not going to wait for one company. We're going to push this forward and win the second space race against the Chinese, get back to the moon, set up a camp, a base, and from there we're going to figure out how we can actually get to Mars.
Musk, of course, was not happy with that declaration. In typical fashion, he started posting on X about it, responding to reports that Duffy's pushing to fold NASA into the Department of Transportation. Musk wrote, "Sean Dummy is trying to kill NASA." In another post, he wrote, "The person responsible for America's space program can't have a 2-digit IQ." And he took a shot at his competitor, writing that Blue Origin has never delivered a payload to orbit, let alone to the moon.
In response to another Musk post where he said that SpaceX is moving at lightning speed compared to the rest of the space industry, Duffy wrote, "Love the passion. The race to the moon is on. Great companies shouldn't be afraid of a challenge. When our innovators compete with each other, America wins." Does America win from Elon Musk and Sean Duffy going at each other, Robby?
No, but Elon Musk should be competing with the other potential tech giants who can offer space services. So I agree and disagree with both of them in part. First of all, I don't think NASA should be folded under the Department of Transportation or should move
Space transportation, Robby. Transportation to the moon.
It makes a certain amount of sense when you put it like that, but no, I would keep it where it is. We don't need that kind of reorganization. Elon, whom I love, as you know.
Yes, but one of our many points of difference, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, I don't love his... that was the nice things he said about Sean Duffy.
There was other stuff that was
getting really juvenile, the way people are relating to each other
I agree.
these days. Like, can we be slightly more,
Right.
I don't mean to sound like an old fogey, but let's just like slightly more mature. Like the White House has started doing your mom comms. Like, Jesus Christ, people, let's elevate our discourse slightly. But
Exactly.
It's
Bit
not
more
a big
respectful.
deal, whatever, but a little bit better. Elon should be competing with other, and that's why I never wanted him, even though I like and value him so much, I don't want him running the government and then steering contracts to himself. He should be competing for those contracts, and he competes very well. It remains the case that SpaceX, there is not Blue Origin or anyone else who can offer the kind of, that is anywhere SpaceX is in terms of actually delivering rockets that can that reach outer space, in terms of the moon race, in terms of the Mars potential. That is all Elon, but I don't want him, despite my affection for him, I don't want him to be able to, rest comfortably. I want him to face vigorous competition from whatever else is out there, Bezos and all the rest. That is good. I think the competition, the space competition, the competition with China is all good. This is a important. The technologies that will be, the sort of related technologies that will be invented as a result of all this are great. I firmly share Elon's goal of us becoming a multi-planetary species. I want the moon base and the Mars colony, all of that. It is so important. But rather than attacking Sean Duffy he should say, you're right, but we're the best game in town, and we're going to beat anybody else who thinks they can do this faster, more cheaply than we can. They can't. It's all SpaceX. That's what Elon should be. He should be being the salesman approach.
So very briefly, because I think we're almost out of time, I think that competition is good. I think that Musk and Duffy seem to have personal beef because Duffy was also critical of Doge cuts to air traffic control. I think that Musk bought himself influence at the heart of government, which I don't like, and he just irritates me generally. I mean, I find him just an annoying person in his propensity to indulge in those kind of juvenile insults or to spread misinformation, which I would argue he does repeatedly.
But unlike a lot of other people spreading juvenile insults, he does have a lot of companies to show for it.
Yeah.
He has something that it's interesting, but we're out of time to discuss that. Does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you tomorrow.